Another huge part of machine quilting, of course, is the thread. It's all about the thread. And I collect thread like other people collect fabric. So I love thread and I love what it can do for my quilts. Back in the day, when I first started machine quilting, I truly was more of a mind that I wanted to use cotton thread because of the purest, idea about you're using cotton fabric, so you should use cotton thread. Well, I have grown, and things have changed, and new threads are on the market, and do not limit yourself to just cotton thread. There are so many other types of threads out there that are so worth it. The easiest thing to start with is a thin cotton. And the reason for that is that if you're using a thin cotton in the top and also the same weight in the bobbin, the tension is going to be easier to balance. And balanced tension means that the top thread and the bobbin thread marry in the layers of the batting. In a perfect world, that would happen all the time, but we are not in a perfect world, and it's something that we deal with all the time in machine quilting. I rarely use the same thread in the bobbin that I use on the top. So I'm constantly messing with my thread tension and trying to get different types of thread to work together. It's doable. There are no rules. Always remember there are no rules. As far as this is concerned, there's even less rules. I experiment constantly. The thread and the needles go together. They truly are one and the same. You have to use the right kind of needle to get the right kind of thread to work. And sometimes, I can't sit here and tell you that there is a certain specific needle that works with this specific thread. It doesn't work that way. Different machines, different fabric, all of those things go into the equation, which causes different results. So you need to be able to be open to experimentation, but I can give you a few guidelines that have worked for me. When I am starting a new project and I have a new combination of thread, I typically always have just a sample quilt sandwich already done for me, put together, and I try my new combination of threads, and I try it on my practice sandwich first, and then I go on to my project. Now, a few of the things that I can tell you that work well together are the metallic thread goes with a metallic needle. And the reason for that is the metallic needle has a coated eye. It's coated with Teflon, and it cuts down the amount of heat that is caused by the friction of the metal thread going through the metal needle. That truly is a helpful added asset of the metallic needle. A top stitch needle has a bigger eye, so if you're using a larger thread that is more of a top stitch type thread, a thicker cotton, a larger eye will help. The smaller your eye, if the eye is too small for the size of the thread, it will shred the thread. So if you notice that happening and your thread breaking, try a larger needle. It will probably solve your problem. Now, another thing students ask me all the time is they hear other people say that you should change your needle each time you start a new project. I'm not of this mind. I put a new needle in when I'm having a problem. So if I know that I've had that needle in for a long time, sometimes I can hear that it's dull and I will put a new one in. But typically when I'm having a problem with thread not going in right, the tension not being right, that's when I go to change my needle. So that's another thing you need to experiment with. It's not a tried and true science. There's nothing specific. I love the variegated thread, and what I look for in a variegated thread is thread that changes color frequently. So an inch or less is what I look for, and it just is smoother going into the fabric, and it gives that much more variety in the color. So I do look for that in variegated threads. Most variegated threads do change color quite quickly. I love all the different kinds of cotton threads. There's so many different kinds. Let's talk a minute about monofilament thread. Monofilament thread it comes in either smoke or clear, and it is something that some people absolutely don't want in their quilt, and it's had a bad rap at times and has been known to fall apart in a quilt or it doesn't age well, is what I've gathered. And It's great though for beginners because it's very forgiving as far as you don't see the thread, you only see the little indentation that the thread makes in the quilt. So it's very forgiving as far as beginners and learning how to machine quilt, and you don't see your errors quite as quickly. So if it's a quilt that you're going to use and you're going to love and a child's going to drag around and that kind of thing, and it's going to get used up in your lifetime, do not hesitate to use monofilament thread. It is nice thread, it's very soft, it doesn't poke you, it's kind of gotten a bad reputation that it doesn't deserve. And if you have a quilt that you want to be around for your lifetime and the next, probably not the best choice. That's about the biggest guideline I can give you about monofilament thread. It is truly what good thing to start for beginners. Then there's threads that are really, really heavy. This thread, you can tell as it's laying here on my cabinet how thick it really is. It does not go through the top of the machine easily. There's too many thread guides and tension guides in the top of the machine. So it is best used in a bobbin, and then you would turn your quilt upside down and quilt it that way. And we'll talk more about bobbin quilting later. But so the larger the thread, it shouldn't scare you off. It's still beautiful, it's still a nice option, and it gives a whole different glitz to your quilt. So the needles, as far as the needles go, stay with a sharp needle. As for the life of your sewing machine and for the drag on the motor, you need to stay away from universal needles and ballpoint needles. They're not sharp, and it takes more of the machine thrust to get it through all the layers of the fabric, and so that causes more drag on your sewing machine. And when you're machine quilting, your machine's working really hard, so you need to help it out as much as possible. Using a sharp needle really makes a big difference. So what I have here, I have some samples, and these are all really sharp points. And there's metallic needles, there are sharps, top stitch, and quilting needles. Any of those are good options, and there's a lot of different sizes in each one. So you kind of have to experiment and be open-minded to get the right combination and test in your sample before you start on your actual project so that you don't have to rip out machine quilting.